Australia's national terrorism threat level is being lifted to probable for the first time since 2022 amid rising radical political and religious tensions and several recent attempted local attacks. ASIO says there is no specific intelligence pointing to an imminent attack, but has cited the war in Gaza as a contributing factor. Defence correspondent Andrew Green has more.
This is a significant announcement, and as you say, Australia's terror alert level has been at possible since November 2022, when the government lowered it from probable. It had been at probable for 8 years prior, and that was at the beginning of the war against Islamic State. Authorities back in 2014 had lifted Australia's national terror alert level to probable. Today, confirmation that it is going back to that level, but as we say, there is no specific threat that's been identified, but rather authorities are pointing to a general rising of the temperature in terms of radical ideology and radical movements within society. A particular area that has been pointed to is social media, and also young men particularly. They have been identified as being involved in 8 attempted terror attacks on Australian soil since April. But let's hear from the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, who was announcing this significant step after the meeting of Cabinet's National Security Committee.
I want to reassure Australians, probable does not mean inevitable, and it does not mean there is intelligence about an imminent threat or danger. But the advice that we've received is that more Australians are embracing a more diverse range of extreme ideologies, and it is our responsibility to be vigilant.
That was the Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, speaking alongside ASIO's Director General, Mike Burgess, and the Attorney General, Mark Dreyfus. For some time, ASIO has been talking about foreign interference and espionage being the greatest threat facing this country in a security sense, and we saw that really overtake terrorism at the same time the terror threat level was reduced. Now that it has gone back to probable, the country's domestic intelligence chief is saying that terrorism now is back to being the greatest threat that his agency is dealing with. It's overtaken espionage and foreign interference. Let's hear from Mike Burgess as he was speaking today alongside the Prime Minister.
Gaza is not the cause of this rising, but actually I acknowledge, yes, it's a significant driver. It's driven more emotion and heat into society. ASIO's job is not to look at people who protest. Lawful dissent, lawful protests are fine. It's the people who think violence is the answer. Not just because of Gaza, though. In this current environment, violence is more likely at protests.
Andrew, tell us, what's been the reaction to this announcement?
Well, so far there has been no reaction from the Greens political party. They were singled out by the Prime Minister for some of the language to do with the Gaza conflict. Labor is pushing back quite strongly against suggestions from the Greens that the Australian government is somehow supporting a genocide in Gaza. The Prime Minister says that is absolutely not the case, and that what is happening in the Middle East has very little to do with Australia or the Australian government. But separately, the opposition leader has spoken about the lifting of the terror threat level. He's been very critical of the decision by authorities not to take a harder line stance against anti-Israel protesters, particularly shortly after the October 7 terror attacks, when we saw protests around the Sydney Opera House. But in any case, Peter Dutton was sounding supportive. Let's hear from him.
I just encourage people, please, to heed the advice from Mike Burgess, because we do live in a precarious time. The national security risks that we have because of our values and what we believe in will always be there, and we need to make sure that that every support is provided to ASIO, and I'll make sure that we do that.
That was the opposition leader, Peter Dutton, speaking in Western Australia, as I say, supportive of this decision to lift the official terror alert level from possible to probable, somewhere it hasn't been since November 2022. And of course, the last time that it was lifted to this level was back in 2014.